In a previous call, I gave an example of a particularly astounding data point of remote healing, where a friend of mine shared a report of encountering his girlfriend's energy in the spirit realm during an ayahuasca ceremony in Peru, entering her energy in the spirit realm and cleaning out her heart chakra, after which he purged, as one does in ayahuasca ceremonies. His girlfriend in the USA texted him later that night saying, "The strangest thing happened. I felt a fish-like thing swim into my heart, and it cleared an energetic blockage there." And I wanted to clarify with you whether this kind of healing would be possible even for two people that have somehow ended up in separate light cones, or whether this level of telepathic precision is too detailed or fine-grained for two people in two different light cones to experience.
Well, even if they're in separate light cones, which are fibers of the co-expansive manifold, they're still a part of the light cone of reality itself. Reality is one big light cone or light sphere, which includes itself, and we're all still a part of that. Okay? So there is no way to get into a completely separate light cone from somebody else. All right? You can always send something to another person by sending it through the global identity. You're part of that identity. It is in self-intersection, okay? Which means that everything in it is also in intersection with everything else. So always there's a way to get from you to anybody else located anywhere in the universe at any time. But it's not that easy. It's not a matter of mechanics. You can't build a machine to do this for you. The machine that does this, if we want to call it that, is the CTMU pre-machine. It's pre-reality that does this for you. It's not in the display yet. This happens prior to the display.
What kinds of messages could get communicated?
Yeah, if I hear a voice in my head, that could be communicated from anywhere, okay? The answer to your question, the generic answer is any message you can understand. Sometimes you're unable to understand the messages that are sent to you this way, however, so they're lost on you.
I see. So if Alice and Bob are in separate light cones, and if there's a computer program that requires Alice's password, could Alice telepathically send the password to Bob, hypothetically?
There's a distinction between message and influence, or signal and influence, okay? The signal and the message contain information. The influence is just something that nudges you in the right direction towards something, okay? We're talking about messages here that are more of a nudge. And your mind, how your mind reacts to this nudge, which is by formulating the message that you think it contains. Okay, that's up to you. Basically, these influences are beneath terminal consciousness, and they're more like nudges than like actual explicit messages that are sent to you. Somebody on the other side of the universe in a separate light cone trying to send you a message isn't even going to be speaking English. It's going to have to be a nudge, right? It's going to have to be something that's pre-linguistic, under the surface, the terminal surface of self-configuring, self-processing language. And the level of syntax and grammar, it's going to be this influence that pushes on you.
Chris, Alex has more context on this than you do, but maybe just take it at face value. But Alex, when I'm able to like say circle like spooky read people, the way I'd explain the subjective experience of it is that a little bit forget that we're different people, and I like set whatever myself is aside a little bit. And what happens in my body is I get like I feel what it's to be them, and then I can remember somatically all the things that are relevant at that moment. And therefore my brain can like look at that now and generate sentences that match in a spooky way to whatever they've experienced.
Exactly, which means that the message is basically stimulating a tell-on in you. It's basically, that's what it is. It's telic recursion.
Yep.
There's an outcome that's what the influence is. It is an outcome that you are meant to experience, and it is going to be translated by your psyche into whatever form it needs to be translated into in order for that outcome to occur. In order for you to end up with the state of informedness that you're meant to be in.
Yeah.
Right.
That sounds totally right. It's like a very co-creative kind of process.
Right, exactly.
And it's nothing like psychically reading somebody's phone number out of their brain or something like that.
Nope.
It's not like that at all.
Although I have seen things like that occur. It is possible for things like that to occur, but usually some amount of physical proximity is required for that.
Yeah, in my experience, physical proximity helps a lot, but I have seen some surprising non-proximity things occur as well.
Of course. That's like I say, Jung called it synchronicity, talking about things that occur, in widely separate places in space and time, right? These can all relate back to one nudge, one program statement that is manifesting itself in different ways, designed to create certain outcome. And that's in this case, synchronicity is usually just a state of focus where you're aware of certain things at one and the same time, which leads you to a certain realization. So that's what synchronicity, that's the tell-on behind synchronicity. It's trying to inform you about the true nature of reality, that it's non-local, that this is connected to that, and that's connected to the other thing, and that it's all interconnected.
How does the CTMU distinguish pseudo telepathy and true telepathy?
What is pseudo-telepathy?
A non-local hidden variable, well, like a synchronicity, basically. I think of pseudo telepathy as when there's one pattern smeared across pattern in meta time that is smeared across time and space that different observers can notice simultaneously, perhaps.
In a panpsychic universe, everything is telepathy. Everything is telepathic. So the universe basically, sending messages to and from itself in diverse locations. So, and then you're saying, well, yeah, don't we have to distinguish that from the deterministic sending of messages in the terminal domain? Absolutely not. They're two different processes, okay? And the more basic of those two processes between telic recursion and mechanics, that has to be telic recursion. So it's all telepathic. So when you say pseudo-telepathic, basically you're talking about mechanical causation. That could be pseudo-telepathic. You could actually call it pseudo-telepathic and still be making some kind of sense.
Okay. Next question. People in near-death experiences often report being able to telepathically communicate with other beings who have passed away. Are those the beings for whom there is a joint communication tell-on between you and them?
Yeah. You're connected to them by a communication tell-on, yes. Which means that there's an influence that is supposed to be passed between you for a specific purpose or, sometimes a general purpose, but that's it. And as far as, them being dead and not in physical reality, that makes no difference because underlying physical reality is metaphysical reality. And you can't just die as a part of that the way you can in terminal reality.
Okay, and if I have some desire to communicate with them, but they have no desire to communicate with me, does that mean I might be able to perceive them in the state, but not establish a two-way communication?
Right. It might simply mean that your attempts to communicate with them are a waste of your time. If they refuse to communicate with you, then, a lot of the time they won't communicate with you, and it would be very hard to get them to. All right. If you have a girlfriend and she has just left you and, I want to communicate my love to her and I want her to come back to me. If she doesn't want to come back to you, she's not going to receive your communication. You understand?
Yeah.
Sometimes she will. If there is still in her a desire to come back to you, then and only then can your communication tell-on be actualized. But if she's dead set against cooperating, if she won't be acquired as a resource of that tell-on, then what are you doing? So it depends. I guess it's a gamble. If you want to try to communicate with her on that level, then you can take it as a matter of faith that she still wants to communicate with you, and in that case, she will. Okay? Otherwise, she won't.
Insofar as people get retracted to different regions of reality after they die, different realms of the afterlife, so to speak. Is it like they're able to communicate with the beings in the realms that are kind of like theirs, but not with the beings that are too far away?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about regions, you want to talk about languages and sub-languages. The sub-language that is spoken, the identity language that is spoken in any given region may not be the same identity language that is spoken in any other. But as long as there is the common language of logic and existence, okay, then there's a chance of a nudge or an influence being passed between you, even if you don't speak the same identity language, even if you don't identify reality in the same way because you're in different realities. Nevertheless, it is in principle possible for such an influence to be transacted. Why? Because we're all basically a part of one reality. And if we're not, we're so profoundly disconnected from the reality to which is not a part of our reality that we might as well disregard it.
Right.
It serves
Okay,
us
that makes
nothing.
sense.
It's totally useless for us to try to even think about a reality that is not a part of our own reality because we won't be able to conceive it.
Next question. How do some people in out-of-body experiences, for example, during a near-death experience, perceive minute details about the people around them from a vantage point as though they were looking from above? Specifically, what is the modality by which they come to have this information? What about the out of body state allows them to acquire this information? And what are the limits to sort of information that can be acquired in such a state?
Well, all of that information exists in the non-terminal domain. It exists in the all of the information generated in reality remains in extended superposition. So all of that information is right there. It's right underneath you, right under your feet. Okay. So when you rise up, you're on the operating table, you rise up and you see the surgeons that are operating on you in real time, even though your eyes are shut and you're down there on the table. Nevertheless, you're receiving information that still exists in the non-terminal domain. It's right there. Okay. And as far as the modality is concerned, you are using a level of consciousness capable of translating between levels of the stratified manifold, or in other words, past the future. But that's what telic recursion does. Okay. And then because you're supposed to remember it, you're being informed of something. Okay. You're being informed basically, you're having an experience like that. You're able to look down, from your vantage and see information happening as though you're still in the terminal domain, still physically conscious in the terminal domain. That's because something is being brought to your conscious awareness, to the awareness of your terminal consciousness. And that is that basically this kind of thing is possible. Reality is bigger than you think it is. Okay? Here's what here's what is actually occurring. You're not going to die, you're not in danger of dying. You're actually communicating, you're actually interacting. You are combined with the people that you're looking at, these surgeons and doctors, you all exist in the same telon. In this case, that telon would be they're performing surgery on you for the benefit of your health.
Alex, this might go without saying, but maybe not. Insofar as you're like visually seeing stuff from a certain vantage point above the table, that's like a co-created thing. You have some like data, and then you have a choice about how to interpret that data, and you're going to do stuff with it that you're used to doing or that's like useful to you. You're not getting
Yeah.
a visual image. You're getting transmitted a bunch of data that you're going to like code to that.
Yeah, that was something that clicked.
Yeah.
Just remember that it's not your brain that's putting this stuff together. Your brain is like an antenna that connects you to something bigger than your brain. Okay, your mind is bigger than your brain is. All right. And we're talking here about telic recursive influences that actually cause certain outcomes to occur. We're not talking about communication in the same sense that we communicate with each other using English in the terminal domain. So it's a more fundamental, a more basic process. All of our acts of communication with each other in the terminal domain they have to do with telons. They are produced by telons, but basically they're produced along the metatime axis by metacausation. They're not the linear strings of symbols that we think they are. Talking to you, you hear a linear string of syllables come out of my mouth. Okay, sounds that you then string together linearly to make sense of them. That's not what's happening. I'm trying to program you to share something that I'm thinking about. And that is what's causing me to talk, what's causing me to use the terminology that I'm using. And hopefully it is also causing your system to put those stimuli together to bring you to that ultimate realization or outcome that is supposed to occur, that is at the source of the communication itself.
Also, one fun thing that falls out of this is, again, back to the operating table thing. Like, how could it be that you can move your vantage point as though you're flying? It's because all the information is there, but the modality you've chosen sort of requires that it come from a point of view, like your metaphorical eyeball. But all the data is there, so you can just move it arbitrarily as you co-create it.
That's pretty much true. Your vantage is being determined by what's supposed to be communicated there, by the whatever kind of interior state of internal consciousness you're supposed to end up in. That's the vantage that is in which this information is being communicated to you.
Questions about the death transition. What happens to the soul of someone cryogenically frozen?
Well, being cryogenically frozen doesn't really affect your soul. Okay. You either remain attached or you don't. And the only way you're going to remain attached to your cryogenically frozen body is if there's utility in it for you. In other words, is there a telon there? Can you gain something out of that cryogenically frozen body? Well, if you can, if there's a possibility that that body will be revived later on, then your soul may remain attached to it. Okay. So that it can actually, come out, it may remain in a state of abeyance, right? Where, as soon as the technology is available for reviving that body, if it's going to exist, then your soul will be able to take advantage of that by reincarnating in the same body that it used previously. Okay? But other than that, there is no difference between just simply dying. Okay? And what happens to your soul then? As I've said, it remains there in the extended superposition, and from there it attaches via your soul to God, or the CTMU highest level of consciousness. Once you retract yourself, you are retracted to the programmatic domain. You're no longer bound by time, and you can sort of like intuit or see or feel whether or not that body is going to come back to life. All right? There's nothing stopping you. You're not stopped by the terminal locality principle from receiving that information. You may, in fact, be able to perceive at least a likelihood that that body is going to be rejuvenated or resurrected, okay, or brought back to life. Because when you're cryonically frozen, you're dead. The only thing is your cells aren't deteriorating. When they're frozen, actually, the water inside them expands, breaking cellular membranes and things like that, making it very difficult for the body to be brought back to life, okay? Your soul knows stuff like that, too. In other words, your soul is probably going to take that to mean, I don't know what these people are smoking, but, they're not going to bring that body back from the dead because the cellular damage of freezing it has now made it impossible to do that under any circumstances. So I'm just going to go be retracted, and then I'm going to be projected someplace else that's more fulfilling for me. Or I'm going to find another body right here, right?
Next question. I've heard some spiritual traditions recommend waiting 3 days before burying or cremating someone, so that permanently irreversible actions are only taken after all their subtle energy has departed their body. What is the subtle energy that might still be lingering in their body?
Well, when the body dies, it doesn't become completely inert. You've still got you've got a lot of cellular machinery there that still keeps on functioning on some level. There are processes that are still occurring in those so-called dead cells, even after you've experienced brain death or some other indicator of life has indicated that you're dead. There's still processes going on there. So what that could mean, what that 3-day delay could mean is that, well, wait a minute, we better wait until all those processes are over because the telor of the dead person may still be exploiting those processes to achieve some level of terminal consciousness. So we can't simply eliminate their terminal body prematurely. We've got to let this play itself out until we're sure that the telor is no longer attempting to use those subcellular processes to achieve some kind of awakening, enlightening, some kind of processing that it actually needs to undergo. You know that cells just don't immediately die, right? They still consist of atoms, molecules, things that are bouncing around in there that don't just stop bouncing around in there. They're still bouncing around in there by ways that are mechanically constrained. There may still be enough of a process there that some level of consciousness can actually be manifest.
What kinds of things could be achieved through that?
Personal enlightenment. There's certain things that you have to preparing yourself in certain ways for what is about to come. The utility would be entirely epistemic, entirely epistemological, and would have to do with your state of mind being bigger than brain. The brain is only an antenna to the mind. You've got what looks like a dead brain on the table, but it is still an antenna that is still partially functioning. There's still processes going on among those molecules that still makes it an antenna. Now, the body isn't going to hop off the table because this dead brain is telling it to, but it can still undergo something that may be like cognition, from which Alex here may be achieving some kind of fulfillment, some kind of closure, some kind of reconciliation. Okay? So that's why that makes sense.
Has the IED of a ghost gone dead with no ability to directly collapse wave functions except via other tellers, just like someone who's totally moved on? Or does it still have some ability to directly collapse wave functions in some terminal medium, like electromagnetic fields, through which it's somehow able to self-model, or maybe some other medium?
Well, yeah. I mean, a tellor does not need to be embodied in the usual sense in order to continue, having effect. It can inhabit other tellors and affect their behavior, and thusly have an effect on reality at large. You see, your mind is using quantum events that are not necessarily located in your brain to achieve its ends. It directs your focus to certain things that exist outside your body, right? Things that are going to cause you to have certain realizations or think about something in a new way, or are going to be useful to you in some other respect. They're going to tell you how you're going to get your next meal into your belly. Okay? That's what tellers do.
Wait, so is a ghost just like any other person who's moved on, but has some particular attachments to things
Well,
in the criminal realm still?
that's exactly correct. And those attachments will have to do with space. Now, when you talk about a place like a castle, like a deserted castle, where ghosts are reputed to hang out, you're not talking about just something physical. You're talking about something that forms an object of perception. So really, that castle is a common perception of a lot of people, and it has a kind of metaformal existence. Okay, the ghost is attached to that syntactic ingredient, that castle, right? And may therefore appear to those who regard the castle. Basically, I'm experiencing a perception of this castle, but there is something that previously inhabited this castle that remains attached to that perceptual element, to that element of perceptual syntax. Therefore, I am going to perceive it along with the castle itself in the process of perceiving the castle. Whereas if it's just a castle, if it's just a material castle, then ghosts are nonsense. Okay? What the ghost wants has nothing to do with the castle or anybody else looking at the castle. The whole point about the metaformal system is that it is a combination of mind and physical reality. Okay? There can be no castle without the mind. Okay? And that mental aspect of the castle that the ghost lives in, that supports the appearance of the ghost to the people who look at the castle. You consist of metaformal quality, quanta of consciousness.
So is a ghost a being that's not fully retracted, or
Yes, it could be a being that is trapped, can't get out, or a being that has some particular attraction to something that, some part of its life that is seeking some kind of, reconciliation or closure, but cannot achieve it, right? Or experience some kind of trauma that imprinted it on the element of metaformal syntax that you are perceiving in the future. Okay, that's what it can be. Sure, all of these things are supported by possibility. Is it happening in any given case? Okay, does the ghost of Mary Stuart inhabit, Castle X in Scotland? I don't know. Never been there to see it, but in principle, it can happen.